All right, we're moving on through our mailbag to question number 3. And I want to say question number 3 is the one I probably get most often. Because again, something has been politicized that should have been left alone. Something has been pushed too hard by some people, but has resulted in this sort of backlash, this Newton's third law, action-reaction kind of social backlash. And I want to say, let's just look at what the science says. And I'm going to talk about why the science says, I think you should wear a mask. But I think there's a reason that not many people are talking about for why wearing a mask makes a lot of sense to me as a scientist, even as a biochemist. There's also a reason why wearing a mask makes sense to me as a Christian. So I'm going to divide this into 2 parts. I'm going to have 2 answers. I'm going to have an answer based on science and an answer based on the Bible. They're going to be the same answer, just supported different ways. So should I wear a mask? I'm going to say the reason why, you may have heard, you should be selfless, you should be loving of your neighbor, wear a mask. I totally agree. But I also want to say, if you want to be selfish, you should also wear a mask too. If you're just looking out for number 1, and you want to be the kind of person like Steve Dallas from Bloom County, who only looks out for himself, even that kind of person should wear a mask, even if you don't care who else gets infected, because it will probably protect you. I've heard an argument that goes from real data about the size of the holes in the mask and the size of the virus. The virus is much smaller, but the virus is aerosolized in water, so it doesn't pass right through. It's in different sizes of droplets, and the question is, are they aerosol sized or are they droplet sized, or what is it like? But the reason why a mask with big holes can stop a little virus is because the virus is somehow suspended in water. And if you can imagine, if the mask is like a chain link fence and the virus is like a little grape, yeah, I could get through the fence if I throw it at the fence, but some of it's going to bounce back. And if I have it suspended in droplets, it's going to be like I have a hose that I'm pointing at the chain link fence. And the chain link fence is not going to stop the hose, but it's going to brunt its flow. And that's exactly what I think will happen if you wear a mask against incoming virus. I think that it will brunt the flow of the virus, and it may not even keep you from getting infected, but it may keep you from developing symptoms. This is an important distinction because cases and symptoms are not synonymous. You have to have a case to have the symptoms, but the severity of your symptoms will vary depending on a lot of factors, including how much virus were you challenged with in the first place. And that is why a mask is a good idea. Even if it doesn't bring the virus to 0, it brings it down and it improves your chances. Just reducing the virus is a good thing. And I think we have this all or nothing thought right now, where we're thinking, either I've got to completely get rid of this virus, I've got to completely suppress it, we got to go to whole New Zealand on this, or we just let it run its course and burn through the population. I've heard people saying that. Both of those are wrong. Just reducing the virus is a bad thing, and maybe it's a bad thing that we can't entirely eliminate for a number of factors. Okay, if that's the case, let's reduce it as much as we can, and just reducing it may be enough for many people to allow them to handle it. The one term that I want to use is inoculum. It's the amount of virus that you're challenged with when you sort of breathe in the virus. It lodges in your system. And you have to imagine if you get 1 million viruses in your system, it's going to be harder for you to fight them off than if you get 1. A small inoculum, less virus, usually results in less disease than a large inoculum. This is true for most diseases out there. This is a general rule of disease. And this is, if you think about it, you're like, why does it matter from a certain perspective? It matters because when a virus is growing inside you, your immune system is growing to counter it. And you have a race to see who can grow faster, the virus or the immune system. If you have a larger inoculum, then the virus has a bigger head start for the immune system to catch up to and grow up. That's the basic reasoning. That's why this is a pretty hard and fast rule throughout all microbiology. In fact, one of the rules for microbiology is you don't have to worry too much about a little virus in your pipette or a little bacteria in your pipette. What you have to worry about is when you've grown the bacteria up on a plate, you don't want to open that plate because you expose yourself to all those bacteria. Much higher dose, much higher risk of disease. So just like you don't open an overgrown plate, but you just throw it away without opening it, In the same way, you want to avoid challenging yourself with large amounts of virus. This has been my argument all along, because it seemed to make sense to me. It rests on a general principle of microbiology. And there's not much evidence yet for how it applies to COVID-19, but it applies to all these other cases. The reasoning seems solid. Here's a paper that's come out. It collects other examples, but there's a lot of examples of how studies that exist for COVID-19 might support this hypothesis. It's not a direct test, and it's more of a review than an experiment here. But seems to be the right reasoning to me. So here's an anecdotal paragraph. I'm a little tired of anecdotal arguments, but on social media, apparently that's what you do. And so here's my anecdotal arguments. There are lots of anecdotes where there are places where there's been a virus epidemic spreading through a place where everyone was wearing a mask. In those cases, the proportion of asymptomatic infections is really high. Infections still happen, but they seem to be without symptoms in many cases. I had an example of this previously. Look back at my June 12 COVID-19 data update, where we talked about 2 hairstylists that were masked and avoided passing the virus, even though they were infected. They avoided passing it on to 100 of their clients. And here's some other examples. There's a hemodialysis unit in Indiana where everyone was masked. They were exposed to the virus, and none of the infections was symptomatic. No infections happen. But we've got to get away from this idea that every infection is a tragedy. Yes, not good, but it's not necessarily symptomatic. And if you wear a mask, it looks like your asymptomatic chances go way up. Case in Oregon, a seafood processing plant, rate of infection among the 124 infected, the rate of asymptomatic infection, 95%. An outbreak in a Tyson chicken plant also showed 95% asymptomatic rate of infection. This is probably on the high end. This is probably cherry-picked. But still, 95% asymptomatic, even if that's cherry-picked, it's good. And so that's the reasoning from science why you should wear a mask. Now, if you are one of the kinds of people who wants to know what the Bible has to say about it, I'm going to move on to that in the next video.